Okay, hello, good afternoon. So today we're carrying on with agency and epiphenomenalism and are you free, are you in charge of your body, are you in charge of your actions, and so on. And we're looking at an article by Benjamin Libet, Do We Have Free Will? Can I just ask, can you put up your hand if you've heard of Libet or the kind of stuff we're doing today before? One? Okay. And if you haven't heard of Libet before? Most people, okay. This stuff should really be much better known than it is. I don't really understand. It's pretty famous, but anyway. For next time, the reading that I've mailed round is a relatively technical scientific article by Patrick Haggard and people in his lab. I'm not, this is from just from last year, I'm not suggesting that you try to master every word of this article. In fact, I would strongly suggest that you do not try to master every word of this article. What I think would be good if you just glanced at the conclusions, maybe the initial abstract and the closing section, and skim it, try to get some sense of what's going on. Even if you don't do that, I will try to rehearse the main points in the lecture anyway. But okay, that's not being sent around. Most of these articles, you really should try and spend a lot of time on them. The Haggard article, I am not recommending you spend a lot of time on it. Not because it's not important, I think it is important, but because it's a science article. Most of that stuff's kind of technical stuff. Who cares, right? The important thing is the bottom line. That's what makes it important. It's not the details of the argument that are so important. Okay. So just to go over what where Huxley had got to, Huxley's point was that there can be a lot of complex, coordinated, goal-directed activity in the absence of consciousness. The frog walks, hops, swims, and goes through his gymnastic performances quite as well without consciousness and consequently without volition. But Huxley said, nonetheless, there's still a sense in which the frog is free. Namely, no one else is making the frog do what it does. No one else is stopping the frog doing what it wants to do. And I guess the note we ended on last time was that that's a very limited sense of freedom. Ordinarily, we want much more than that. Not just the absence of someone restraining us or making us do stuff. What we want is to be in charge. We want, for our decisions, for our intentions, our plans, we want for that stuff to be what's making things happen. But then the argument is, if you can do all this complex coordinated activity without consciousness, why think that consciousness is ever what's making things happen? I said there are simple ways in which, I was actually trying to remember, the physiologist who told me this thing, that a human on a treadmill will continue to walk, well, he said even if decapitated, even if in the absence of consciousness. Okay, I don't know how he established that. I know physiology is an experimental science, there must be some way. Anyway, I'll leave that as homework. But in a way, it's been the lesson of a lot of psychological work since around 1980. There's been an explosion of work showing people are capable of doing all kinds of complex activities without consciousness. I mean, if you take something like just deciding to pick something up, there are cases of blind sight where someone with blind, put up your hand if you've heard of blind sight. Okay, will you guys keep me straight if I get this right? Blind sight, the patient gets a bash to the back of the head, and vision travels from the eyes to the back of the head, and then it spreads out in different directions back through the brain for more processing. And people with blind sight get damage to the back of to the visual system at the back of the head in such a way that one half of their visual field has got no conscious experience in it. You try to report what's going on in the left side of your visual field, and you can't report anything. You ask the patient, tell me what I'm holding up in the left side of your visual field, and the patient says, I can't see a thing. You say, is it upright? Is it horizontal? Is it square? Is it round? What is it? And the patient says, I don't know. I can't see anything there. And you say to the patient, okay, guess. We'll give you $1 if you guess. We'll give you a kick if you don't guess. And then thus motivated, the patient guesses. Is it upright? Is it square? Is it a circle? And patients are reliably correct in this. They can reliably guess correctly as to what's in the blind field. And if you say, well, reach for it, try to pick it up, the patient will reach their hand in the right direction with the hand shaped properly to grasp the thing, even though they have no awareness there. So in blind sight, you have patients who, without the benefit of consciousness, are capable of complex, goal-directed, perceptually guided actions. And that raises a natural question. Maybe when the consciousness is there, it isn't actually helping you in your actions. I was reading a dramatic example of, there's motion blindness, a syndrome where the patient can't see movement. The patient, in effect, gets a sequence of frozen images of the scene around them. So life for such a patient is very frightening. In a way, it's worse than ordinary blindness, because you'll have a scene like this, and then suddenly, a moment later, everything has changed. People have moved. Water pouring out of a jug seems to be frozen, and then suddenly there's no movement there at all. I was reading a report of a set of studies being done in one of these patients with motion blindness, by an experimenter who, in his own life, was a keen cricketer. He had a cricket ball lying around. He tossed the cricket ball to the patient, just casually, and she grabbed it. She got it. Right? So motion blindness should mean you can't do that, right? You have no conscious experience of the movement of the ball. All you're getting these frozen images. But she caught the ball just fine. So what these cases are showing you is that consciousness seems to be an add-on extra. So Huxley's line of thinking has really been developed and extended a lot in the last, since 1980, the last 30, 40 years. Okay? But Libet's line of argument is sharper and more focused. We tend to think of conscious thinking as executive control. If you think of the body as an organization, I mean, this is a random sample of the structure of an organization with the CEO right at the head, and then there are various vice presidents, managers, and so on in different branches. The CEO says, let it be so. The vice presidents scramble to make it so. Down the chain, everything happens to make it so. You have the yes men, you have the nodders, all down the line, yeah, scurrying to make it so. That is a traditional picture of an organization. And that's the picture that we tend to have of ourselves, right? That's a picture of your own conscious thoughts. Here is the body, this mighty organism. I'm in charge. I say, I wish to raise my hand. For that to happen, all kinds of brain systems have to swing into play. But I got to be in charge and make it happen. If you're a dualist like Descartes, and you think there's two kinds of stuff, the ectoplasm and the physical stuff, then what you want is that the ectoplasm is in charge of the physical stuff. The ectoplasm is making it all happen. So you form a conscious intention. I'm going to grasp the controls here. The conscious intention kicks into action the brain processes make the action happen. That's what freedom is. That's what being in charge is. Your conscious intentions are the CEO in charge of the whole thing. That's in a dualist picture. The conscious intention comes from outside the brain system. But we also talked about physicalism. I mean, for most of this class, our working hypothesis is physicalism. There's no more to the world than the physical world. If you have two possible worlds that are the same in all physical respects, then they're the same in all psychological respects. In any two possible worlds, you have two people who are physically identical, then everything about their minds is going to be identical. So on that kind of picture, the conscious intention and the brain process, the conscious intention is going to be something like identical to the brain process, or realized by the brain process, or implemented by the brain process, something like that. They're not distinct existences, the conscious intention and the brain process. But then the brain process that's realizing the conscious intention, that should kick off the rest of the brain processes that lead to action. Yeah? So either way, your conscious decisions are the start of the process that leads to action. Your unconscious brain process, your brain is your friend. Your brain, I mean, it is really handy having a brain, but the reason it's so handy having a brain is that it does what you want. It's your helper. It gets your body to do all the stuff that you want it to do. So that's the picture that's opposed to the epiphenomenalist picture, where on the epiphenomenalist picture, what the conscious life is doing comes after everything else. On that picture of the conscious mind as in charge, the conscious mind comes first. Okay? The actions of the conscious mind come first. Wednesday? Okay. And the trouble with Libet's results is that they seem to blow up that picture. They seem to show that that just cannot be the right picture to have of the relation between the mind and the body. So for a long time, it was known that if you tell a subject with EEG measures on them that sometime in the next couple of minutes, just push the joystick, hit the button, then you're letting the subject decide for themselves when they do this, just when the whim takes you to do this. Then that's preceded by a slow electrical change recordable on the scalp at the vertex for the pointy-headed subjects. Okay, so what you've got there is a readiness potential. You've got the brain warming up to perform the action. And you can determine the onset time or the readiness potential. When the brain's starting to warm up to perform the action, how long before the action does that happen? And you can also ask, well, when in that chain of things does the conscious intention come? But how would you do that experimentally? How do you determine experimentally when the conscious intention is going to come? Well, Libet's brilliant solution was, have the subjects report the onset time using a clock. You know, something like this, with the dot going round and round about 25 times faster than the hand on a regular clock. And you say to the subject, when you decided to push the button, the subject is sitting there saying, okay, sometime in the next 2 minutes I've got to push the button. And then the subject thinks, I'll do it now. So when you have that thought, do it now, where was the pointer on this clock? That's what the subject asks. Just remember where the pointer was. So one question about that is that a good measure of the onset time of the conscious intention? And Libet had two controls on this. The subject, in one set of trials, the subject did not have to perform any voluntary act. So instead you just give them a mild electric shock. A weak electrical stimulus was delivered. Just do that to the subject anytime, and then ask the subject to report where was the dot when you got the shock. And what they found was that it was taking subjects just 50 milliseconds to report the shock. The experimenter knew when the shock was being administered. The subject was spotting when they felt it, when it came into consciousness, just 50 milliseconds afterwards. And then when you, I mean, the thing about psychological, I've been a subject in quite a few psychological experiments, and I have never had the slightest idea what's going on. I mean, I just sit there in front of a screen and jab at things randomly, and at the end of it, the experimenter says to me wistfully, you didn't really show the effect. And yeah, so my hand was out, because these guys dealing with populations like me the whole time. And so getting reliable results in these things is not easy. But when they asked subjects, report your first awareness of the wish to act, of your forming the intention to do it now, then they're within 20 milliseconds. They're very reliable. You get the same answer each time, that the onset time is coming before the actual action by very reliable intervals. And then the picture we have is that your conscious decision should be the start of the process leading to action. But what Libet found was that the onset of the readiness potential, when they find the brain activity leading to the action beginning, that starts 550 milliseconds, just over half a second, before the activation of the muscle. The time for the first awareness of the wish to act is about 200 milliseconds before the action. Once you adjust that it's taking 50 milliseconds for, there's a 50 millisecond delay in the time reported from the onset time of the sensations. That's what they think they're getting from those things about the electric shock. Then what's happening is that the brain process is beginning to prepare for the conscious act about 400 milliseconds before you have the conscious intention. So that might not sound very striking, but when you think about it, that is really dramatic. What's going on is that you're sitting there thinking, sometime soon, I'm going to press this button. Then your brain starts up. 400 milliseconds later, you form a conscious intention. I'll do it now. And then you act. So your conscious intention was not initiating the process. Your brain was initiating the process. The conscious intention kicked in later. So motor readiness potentials are coming before you forming the intention to act. So your conscious intention isn't the source of the movement. So just to be absolutely clear here, you have the subject waiting to push the button, all hooked with her brain, all hooked up to the EEG. They're using the clock on the screen to report the time of their conscious intention. The guy watching the EEG knows in advance of the subject's awareness of the conscious intention, they're going to do it now. You see what I mean? Your brain is making the decision. You are just coming along later, saying, yeah, I want to do that. So the natural picture here is that what's going on is that these cell firings that cause the action, they kick in first. They cause the action. The conscious intention comes along later, and it doesn't actually affect the action directly. Now, since Libet put that result out. It drew a ton of further work. I mean, it's still going on. What we'll see on Friday is it's still going on in a very lively way today. But one of the things about it is 400 milliseconds is pretty short, right? That's 0.4 of a second. And the other thing about it is when the brain is just showing these warm-ups, you might think, well, that's just your brain getting ready for you to do all the work, to do the intention. You haven't really decided anything at that point. So here are some results that were reported in Nature Neuroscience for 2008. Libet actually anticipated the possibility of this kind of result in his article, in the article we're looking at. But these guys found there were two specific regions in the frontal and parietal cortex that had considerable information that predicted the outcome of a motor decision the subject had not yet consciously made. So in their experiments, a subject is being asked, push the lever to the left or to the right. Whichever one you like is your call. And meanwhile, at the back of the room, someone is monitoring the brain activity from these two regions. They didn't get a 400 millisecond delay. They found that when the subject's decision reached awareness, it had already been influenced by unconscious brain activity for up to 10 seconds. So 10 full seconds before you said to yourself, I'm going to do it now, the guy at the back of the room monitoring your brain activity knows that you're going to push the lever. And not just that, they know whether you're going to push it to the left or push it to the right. You haven't consciously made the decision. 10 seconds before you consciously make the decision, the guy looking at the brain activity knows which way you're going to push it. That prior activity is not the unspecific preparation of a response. Instead, it specifically encodes how the subject is going to act. So presumably you could generalize that for just anything you do, anything you say. Someone with monitoring your brain would know before you do what you're going to do. So that means that something like this picture just has to be correct. The conscious intention isn't driving everything else. The conscious intention is not in charge of the whole process. All that's happening is that the brain is deciding, push it to the right or push it to the left. Then there's this ongoing, there are these ongoing waves of brain activity to implement that decision, push it to the right. You, at a relatively late stage in the process, get the conscious intention, make the conscious decision, let's move it to the right. But that wasn't what determined is it going to the right or to the left. The brain activity did that. So you are not in charge of your actions. That's what the result means. And there's a flood of similar results coming out. Haggard in his 2011 review of this said this is a general trend in the neuroscience of volition. Although we may experience that our conscious decisions and thoughts cause our actions, these experiences are in fact based on readouts. That's what your conscious life is. It's a readout of brain activity that is going on prior to, independently of your conscious decisions. You get readouts, and it's those networks of brain activity that control voluntary action. Yeah. 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 I think what they mean there is that the variance of the times within the group. I mean, if you're like me in an experiment just jabbing, right, then you're going to get a lot of fluctuation in what the times are. Yeah, what you've got is there's the action, and there's your report of the time at which the conscious intention to do it now appeared. Yep. And I think what they're saying there is that the key thing is the interval between the time you're reporting using that clock and the time of the action itself, the time you squeeze the button or push the trigger, right? So there's that interval. And what they're saying is that is within 20 milliseconds, the variation in what this interval is. You see what I mean? So you're getting the same result again and again. So you know you're measuring something, because it's not like my thing of just jabbing randomly when you get a lot of fluctuation. Yeah? So this is a good guide to something anyway. Yeah? Okay, so you're not responsible for your actions. I mean, that's what it means, right? That is the result, yeah? It's happening in your brain, yeah? It's my unconscious processing, that's right, but I'm not in general responsible for my unconscious processing. I mean, if you and I are in an elevator and someone hits my, you know that thing in your knee where you, yeah, I need to do more of a demonstration than that. Yeah, you hit that thing in your knee and the foot jerks up. Yeah. If I say to you, oh, when I kicked you there, that wasn't my conscious intention. Someone just jabbed me in the knee and my foot jerked. Yeah. Then that's okay if you believe me. Then I'm off the hook. I can't be held responsible for what my body does unconsciously. If someone, if someone says to you, stop coughing for God's sake. Yeah. I mean, the whole point is it's not under the control of your volitions. Yeah, that's why it's so unfair. Isn't that right? That's right. We're calling it yeah. But it's a reflex. Well, the reason it matters that it's a reflex is that means it's not under the control of your conscious intentions. Yeah. And if it's not under the control of my conscious intentions, I'm not to blame. If my coughing is not under the control of my conscious intentions, then I'm not to blame. Yep.